This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, Show 3. Will you marry me? No, it's not that kind of relationship building. Okay.
Welcome to We the SE's podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers, hosted by Ramzi Marjaba. Did you know that he makes breakfast for his son every morning? How sweet is that? Hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, you beautiful sales engineers. Thank you for joining me on this very rainy day in Ottawa. I just wanted to clarify one thing. The reason I make breakfast for my son every morning is because he seems to be hungry every morning. Go figure. Moving on. Today's chat was with Hikmat Ajaltouni, and I've known Hikmat for a very long time. We go way back to Lebanon, the country, not the town in Pennsylvania. Another fun fact you didn't know about me, or maybe you did. Anyways, so far he's built a great career at Cisco as a sales engineer, and today I got the chance to pick his brain about the generalities of being an SE, but we also dug deeper into relationship building, and hence the question at the start of the podcast. But I recommend you don't ask that question to your customer. I don't think they would like that, or maybe they will, and then you're stuck. If you like the show, please leave a rating and review. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you can see it automatically appear in your app. So without further ado, here's Hikmat. Hey Hikmat, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Ramzi.
How's it going, man?
Great.
Awesome.
Great. So thank you for having me, man.
Well,
It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, it definitely is my pleasure to have you on. I'm trying to get as many SEs to share information with each other, so I'm glad that you are willing, and I know your entire team was involved, it seems, for you to join, so I'm happy you were able to make it.
Yeah, great. No, you're doing something great, and I'm glad to be part of it. It's great to help SEs and give some guidance into what would be the best skills for them.
Awesome, man. Well, how about we start with the beginning? Maybe who you are and why are you on my podcast? What makes you so interesting that I actually asked my good friend Hikmat to be on the podcast?
Okay, so Ramzi, first off, before I get started, I need to have a disclaimer, which is that anything I'll be saying during your show, it's solely my personal opinion, and it's not an official Cisco response. Okay, now for me, a few things about myself. I've been in the industry for almost 10 years. I started initially, my interest towards networking started when I was doing my undergrad. I was doing a Bachelor of Engineering, and I took a course on networking, and I just got fascinated by how packets flow and the entire internet. So then I joined the Cisco Networking Academy, where I completed a CCNA certificate. So for those on the show who don't know what's a CCNA, it's a Cisco Certified Network Associate, which is a beginner's degree for networking. It's not only focused on Cisco, although it's a Cisco certificate. It's very generic in terms of the information available, and it covers a wide range of routing protocols, switching, some wireless as well. Now then I completed my bachelor's, then I did a master's as well in networking. So I specialized in wireless networks, and I did my thesis and several publications on vehicular networking. So I got deeply involved on the theoretical end of it. Then I applied to Cisco at that time, and I started my career there with them. And initially, I was more a customer proof of concept engineer. So I used to run proof of concepts and demos for customers and custom build them based on their own requirements. Moving on, I became a channel SE, so I covered channels. During that time, I worked on my CCIEs. I did lots of certificates outside Cisco as well, like some VMware certificates. Then I became a fully fledged SE around 5 years ago. And since then, I've been supporting the Canadian government in Ottawa.
Awesome, man. All right. So I want to step back a lot because your paragraph was full of information. So just back to your disclaimer, I want to point out to everybody that I'm not inviting companies. I'm inviting individual SEs with their own experience. So we will not be sharing secrets of different companies. We're just going to be talking about skills of SEs. So yeah, I agree with you. It's your opinion. Same as this podcast, the opinions I provide are my opinions and nothing related to my own company. All right, so I want to clarify something about CCNA. So the routing, like basically all certifications that Cisco provides, they are routing general. So the protocol or the technology itself could be applied in any different company. It's not specific to Cisco, although it has some proprietary stuff. But the configuration is done on Cisco routers. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say on the configuration side, you're right. It's like the CLI commands, and a lot of the, I would say, the execution is done on a Cisco platform, whether it's a router or if you do like a CCIE data center, then it's going to be a UCS server. But however, the theory, and because in every module, every course you take, there's always a theoretical part and then the execution part. Now, the difference between vendors is always about like the syntax. Yeah, I mean, some vendors use a certain command for let's say a VLAN, and then another one uses a different command. But this is more a syntax difference. For those courses, what I feel like they are generic in terms of the protocols, because a lot of them are IEEE standards, a lot of them are generic across the industry. And then you're right, like on terms of the actual implementation, yes, it's gonna be on Cisco products.
Yeah, I can say that because I did the similar certification, but with Alcatel-Lucent, where the technology is the same. As in, like, let's say we're talking about a routing protocol, it would be the same implementation between Alcatel and Cisco, but different way of configuring it through the CLI. And they have to be the same because the two have to work together, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned POC, proof of concept, and you would do like demos for customers based on their requirements. How do you get those requirements?
Okay, so that's a great question. So for me personally, when I first joined Cisco, so I wasn't a full SE in terms of I wasn't meeting customers and gathering the requirements. So I was more helping SEs in setting up those environments. So for me at that time, I was more in a position where I get the requirements from SEs who are covering the account, then I work with them into building this environment. But to answer your question, I mean, because for the last 5 years I've been an SE and I was on the field. So for gathering customer requirements, it's a large process. I mean, sometimes if you've never met the customer, it's gonna be a discovery meeting. It's completely different than if you have a relationship with the customer and then he asks you about something particular. Again, I mean, the process changes, and I can talk to you on both ends of the spectrum, whether like it's a new customer and you're just meeting him, or whether you already have a relationship and he knows exactly what he wants and he talks to you about it. So this is a completely different scenario. So do you want to cover both, or what do you want to do?
Well, it's your podcast. Whatever you find that would provide value for the listeners, we can go with that. So let's cover both.
Okay, sure. So in terms of discovery, usually for me, I would say when I first meet a customer, I try not to come in terms of presenting what we have. Like initially, we'd like to come in and listen, because a lot of our customers might not have deep technical knowledge into what do they need. Like they might understand more the business part, say like certain business objectives, like they want to improve productivity, they want to reduce costs, they have a system in mind, but they don't know exactly the technical details involved. So in those discovery meetings, I'd like more to listen on the business side, and try to formulate with the customer what's needed for their success. A lot of times those meetings, I would say, like from the initial discovery meeting, there won't be a lot of technical information. So we sit there, we go back and forth. Maybe we're going to meet a couple times as we narrow down what the customer really wants. Once we have that set up, then we can move to the proof of concept part where we can build it and invite the customer to come in and see it in a production environment. Moving on, say the customer already is technically knowledgeable and he knows exactly what he wants. In those scenarios, the dynamic is a little bit different. Since the customer is knowledgeable, the level of conversation becomes a little bit deeper on the technical side. And a lot of times it might take us one meeting to nail down the technical requirements, and then we can go directly to the demo part.
Okay, so you said you do 1 or 2 meetings for the discovery, and the discovery is pretty much the first phase of the sales process, or is that second phase? Which phase is that?
Yeah, so again, I mean, it depends. Customer are different. It's not that there is one size fits all. I've seen discovery calls where we go in the first time, like we've never met the customer, we introduce ourselves, and again, we tend to listen more in those meetings than to directly jump into conclusions, because if we don't know the customer yet, but we don't have a deep relationship with him, then it's time for us to build that up and listen to his requirements. So back to your question. I mean, it's gonna take time. It's not about a one time process on the discovery side. So we build this relationship, and then after a while, we can jump into the technical requirements. Did I answer your question?
In a way, like, yes. So the way I think about it is that those initial meetings where you're just building a relationship, I think of them as just an awareness stage where you're trying to get the customer to be aware of you and possibly aware that you're there for them. So that's the thing about being an SE. You said it. No one size fits all. Different SEs think about it in different way. Different companies do it in different ways. And you mentioned we a lot. Who's we?
Yeah. So you know, as an SE, you are paired up with an AM, and usually the dynamic. I would say, like at Cisco, I can't talk about other vendors, but this is how I've done it for the last 10 years. So the way it works is we get paired with an AM. An AM is an account manager who more manages the relationship of the account. He holds a number, and then we work together to meet that target. Now, the way I see it, as an SE and an AM, think about us as a small company. Like, this is the way I look at it. It's like we're entrepreneurs. We have a mission, which is to meet a certain target, and a lot of times we can exceed it. Like, you can definitely meet or exceed. And we strategize. We sit down together. We work very closely to come up with ideas, plans into how we can benefit our customer, and during this process exceed our sales quotas. Now, a lot of times sales processes might be short. Like you can come in for something simple, but when you're working with the Canadian government, it's definitely longer sales process. So sometimes you need to be engaged in RFPs, you need to build relationships. It takes time. And something we have, I would say, like an ideology with my AM, we both share, is that we always do what's right for the customer. I mean, even sometimes if it might mean that like Cisco is not benefiting directly, if the customer is happy, this is what matters. I know I might sound here a little bit cheesy, but this is how we do the business. I mean, for us, building the customer relationship and owning this relationship, it will serve us for the long term, instead of going in for a sale. So if we know it's not the right thing for the customer, we just don't propose it. And part of this dynamics I have with my AM is we're both aligned, we both work together, we engage together, we usually prepare before our meetings, we go in prepared, and eventually we try to understand the customer and give him what's right for him.
Just to comment about that cheesy part, it's not really cheesy, I don't think. I think that's the way people should work or strive to work. Not to sound negative about car salesmen, but this is not a one-time sales, or like you go to Best Buy and buy a laptop and you're out and you don't buy anything for another 5 years. This is an ongoing relationship, right? You have to, if the customer is mad at you, how are you going to go back and talk to him? Also, you're going to be seeing this customer over and over as a human being. You don't want to be going to a customer and look at with him looking at you with disdain. In general, my opinion, for whatever counts. Couple of questions. You mentioned in a couple of different occasions, account manager holds the number. You mentioned target and you mentioned quota. I believe these are all the same three things, but do you mind defining those?
Sure. So let's start with the first ones. You mentioned the sales target. So again, I would say Cisco offices do this a little bit differently. I can't share with you like what we do in our office, and because it might be different than any other office. So eventually the way it works is every AM and SE should have a number, whatever it is. Say it's like 10 million as an example. This, on one hand, it justifies the presence of a sales force for the vendor. On the second hand, the SE and AM should work together to meet that number. So say it's 10 million. So sometimes it might be divided per quarter. And again, like there are always, this part of any sales process, there's always commits which happen every quarter. Those should be done regularly. And the AM and SE should always keep an eye on their target. Now, if they meet the number, great. I mean, sometimes you can meet it, say, half of the year. It's great. Then most of the people in the sales force, they have a compensation plan which depends on you meeting the target. So if we meet the target, you will get like your full compensation plan. We call it like an on-target salary. But then as you exceed your number, this is where there are multipliers which come in, and then you might get way additional bonus than what you originally have in your contract. So this is in general how the incentives for SE and AMs work. Yeah.
Okay. Nope, that's fair. And although Cisco might be a little bit different, but I believe every company would provide a quota for all sales teams that they should make. And if they make their full commission and possibly bonuses. And if they don't make their full commission, and maybe their performance review would also be reflected in that. So it's not just about the money; it's also your performance in your company. Like so.
Yeah, of course. And I'd like to add something here. That a lot of times, I mean, for SEs, I'll talk more on the SE side. Sometimes if say you don't meet your number for a certain year, it might mean that you didn't perform well, or it might mean you performed really well, but I mean something happened out of your control which didn't close the sale. So for us, and I would say like personally, I can talk about myself, like I understand sometimes things happen, but it doesn't mean that if you don't meet your number, like you failed at your job, because a lot of times you might be doing your best, you might be working very hard, and the sale is just not closing for several reasons. I mean, there are reasons sometimes out of anyone's control. So the way it works, I mean, there are multiple things, multiple factors being taken into consideration to assess someone's performance. Number is one factor, but it's definitely not the only factor.
For SEs, it's a little bit different than for salespeople, right? In the sense that, like, we can do a lot of things right and still we're not in control to close the deal. Whereas the salesperson, he's a little bit more in control in terms of his actions because it's his job to close. But it's also affected by external factors, like the government decided not to spend anymore this year. If it's year after year, it would affect the salesperson more than the SE in some situations. I don't know if it's the same for you guys. I don't know if you want to share that. If not, that's fine. But
yeah, I would definitely say again, I mean, it depends on the manager in charge. It depends on the way this certain team, like say region, work. I mean, sometimes it's different. And again, I can talk, what I said is not only focus on SEs. I understand AMs are more accountable for their number, and this is true. However, I still see AMs, like if they have the right relationships, if they know their customer, if they're deeply involved, if they are doing the right commit, because one of the other things for AMs to judge them is like if they know that their customer is not ordering because of this and that, he knows what's happening. At least he's giving the right forecast. He's not giving like the wrong numbers. He doesn't have the wrong expectation. So, I mean, if it happens for say like 4 or 5 years and he misses his number, then yes, this is a different story. But if it happens for like 2 years, some factors outside of his control, I don't think his job is on stake. It takes more than the number itself to justify the performance of any employee. But I agree with you that numbers have a high weight. But again, they're not the only factor.
So really quickly, you mentioned forecasting. Do you mind explaining what that is?
Yeah, so forecasting, it's the process where account managers, and this is not an exercise for SEs, account manager estimate a certain number for a certain week. Sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's quarterly. So they need to forecast what do they expect they will bring in business during a week. And then based on this forecast, it goes up the chain to managers and then to regions. And this is what helps Cisco every quarter meet their number or forecast for the next quarter.
Awesome. You mentioned, so I'm trying to go back on a couple of things that you said. You said you strategize on what you need to do. You and your AM, you strategize on what you need to do to benefit your customers. So if you're having like at the beginning of the year, you're sitting down, you're strategizing. How do you know which customer would need what? Talk me through your thinking a little bit in that aspect.
Yeah, sure. So what I'd like always, like my strategy in working with an AM and engaging with the customer is always to make the customer we want him to buy and not to feel like we're trying to sell him something. So if a customer really needs say a certain solution to address a business requirement, this is where we come in and we try to understand exactly what he wants. Now, if that's a product which we have and we have as part, because Cisco's portfolio is huge. I mean, we cover unified communications, we cover routing, switching, data center, wireless, security. We have a lot of products, and in most cases, we do have a product or a solution, and And we're trying to go away just from selling technology-specific products and specs. Like we are more in the business solution business, and this is why, because of Cisco's breadth of products, we try to engage more in terms of, okay, like what's your business need, and this is our solution, which might integrate multiple technologies to provide this expected outcome. So the way we strategize is, first off, we understand the business requirement. We are really on the customer side. Like, he comes first. We need to understand what he wants and what he's trying to achieve. Then we sit down together and we try to see if there's anything we can help him with. Depending on how this goes, I mean, we can then sit down again with him and propose few things. And then we see his appetite, and then based on that, we can take it to the next level, which might be a proof of concept, a demo, or we might work with him closely. So it's as you said it's a incremental process. It's not like a one-time sell. It takes time, and I would say the key to success is to have empathy with the customer, understand what he really wants, be prepared for your meetings, do your homework, understand his requirements, and then build him the best solution out there.
Okay, so the next question I'm going to ask you might actually be a deep conversation that would require its own podcast, but we'll try to tackle it as best we can. I might be completely wrong too. So you mentioned that you talk to the customer and you try to figure out what his business problem is and provide a solution for that, right? What if you know a customer has a business problem, but your customer is not fully aware of that, or he thinks it's a minor problem? How do you go about trying to convince him of the significance of his problem?
Yeah, so actually, Ramzi, this is a great question, and I can talk to you about like experiences which happened to me, and I reached a conclusion again with the AM that if the customer is not ready, like there's no point talking to him about it. I completely get your point that I mean he sometimes might have something which he doesn't understand, but we can't be in a position to force him if he doesn't understand the justification for it. At the end of the day, people buy for their reasons and not our reasons. I mean, yes, it's great that people buy from Cisco, but this is not our objective. Our objective is to make sure that if he finds this is something he needs, and he has the budget, he finds this as something he's lacking, and he's putting the resources to get it, this is where we can help him out. But we're not in a position to go in and change his perspective about things he doesn't understand. Now, just want to add one point here, that if we have, and I would talk about customers where you do have a deep relationship, and say you are considered a trusted advisor. Again, like for SEs, the way I see our progression is initially you don't have trust. Initially you meet the customer, you're still new, he doesn't know you, he doesn't trust you. With time, as you bring value day after day, he will start trusting you. And at some point, you feel you became a trusted advisor where he really talks to you about what's going on, and sometimes he might engage you with things outside of your expertise. And this is where you feel that he really trusts you and he values your opinion. So in those positions where I feel I'm really as a trusted advisor and I have built that trust, then I think that if I suggest something for him, back to your question, it will make sense. Because he listens to me. But if I'm still in a point of the relationship where he doesn't know me that well and he doesn't trust what I'm saying, it's better for me not to push him into doing something, although I know that it might be beneficial for him.
I fully agree. Like basically, it was different from what I was thinking, but when you talked about it like that, you know, I like where you're going with that, and I really like you keep saying the word relationship, and I like that, and I want you to dig deeper into that. So. How do you build a relationship? And you mentioned when he trusts you when he starts asking you questions that's not related to you, but how do you get to that point?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Ramzi. So it's really simple. I mean, I'll tell you about my experience. When I started working, like I used to think building a relationship like it's a science or something you can learn, or like it's not that. It's just like you need to feel you feel the connection. Like the way it works is with like any relationship you build with anyone in your life. So whether it's a friend, it's your wife, whoever it is, it's the same. It's the same feel of relationship. It's definitely not the same relationship, but the way you feel you're connected to someone. Initially, what worked for me, I would say I come in, I listen. I try to listen more than I talk, because it's important initially to understand the other person. Then after a while, and that's one of the key things. It takes time. Like you can't build like if someone comes to you and tells you like I have a relationship with this customer and he's known him for 1 month, like it doesn't make sense. It's just not there. The way you strengthen the relationship is when you go through times of crisis, say, and you show that you are like you show empathy to your customer and you help him out in those times. Like this is where your trust factor will rise. It's just that this deep connection that you feel you truly care about his needs and his concerns, and you want him to be successful. Like a lot of people are in this business, like let's say, to just make money and treat it as a job. And this is, I would say, the recipe for failure. Because if you're in a business where you're connected to the people, you need to show the people that their problems are your problems. That whatever is on their mind is definitely on your mind. If you feel it's been say a month and you didn't hear back from the customer, that means you don't have the relationship. That means he's not talking to you. That means he's probably busy with someone else. That means he's doing something completely out of your, out of your expertise. So to build that relationship, it's just a matter of feeding the relationship through meetings, bringing value, making sure you care about him, about his success, and putting him first instead of putting your objectives ahead of his.
So you're telling me that building a relationship has nothing to do with taking customers out to dinner?
So if this helps, then for sure go for it. I mean, definitely there are some restrictions. If you're in public sector, you're not allowed to do that. So we try to shy away from it. But the way it works, like if you have a relationship with someone, yes, I mean if you go for a lunch and you're discussing a business, this is an opportunity for you to build a relationship. But this is definitely not the only opportunity for you to do that. So you can do it over lunch, you can do it on a call, you can do it by showing interest every day, by being there for him in times of crisis. There are multiple ways. But going out with your customers for lunch or dinners, it's definitely another venue.
I haven't seen it to work, honestly, from my experience. Lunches and dinners, like customers who want to go out to lunch with you are just generally there for the lunch. Like if you have a relationship with a customer, you already said that, so I'm just gonna emphasize that. If you have a relationship with a customer, lunch is so much more valuable because you get to like have a chat outside of work environment. But if you're using lunch to build that relationship, most of the time what I've seen is the customer will just want to come out to lunch because it's free food, and it's fair. We're trying to we're talking to him, we're taking some time away from his work, from his day. So if you want, if he wants to do that, that's fine. It's just not the best way to build a relationship, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I completely agree with you. I mean, there are different purposes for people going on for a free lunch. But just to go back to my point, again, it's all about this feeling that it's really hard to describe. Like if you might meet a lot of people in your life, and sometimes you feel you're connected to someone and you're not connected to someone else. I think there is some unconscious in it. Like it's something that's really hard to describe when you feel you have the connection with the person. Now back to the lunch and dinner. The way it works, I mean, if it's been a while you didn't see your customer, and then everyone at the end of the day he needs to eat at some point. And this is, for me, I find that this is the time where he's not really losing time, because we all need to be cognizant of our customer's time, right? Like during the day he's busy, he's working. You want to be closer to him. And usually he needs to eat at some point. So lunch is always a perfect time for people to meet and talk over things which are not necessarily related to work. And this is the other advantage of doing something social with your customer, like not necessarily lunch. So lunch and dinner is, I would say, again, it's one venue, but you can also go out with him golfing. You can go out with him, watch a game. There are multiple activities that you can do with your customer. But I would say the most important benefit you get out of those activities is the fact that the customer will open up to talk to you about things outside work, because I think it's more psychology that when someone is doing a different activity outside work, he will be more open to talk to you about other things in life. And this is where you become more, I would say, friendly with your customer. You might evolve to become his friend, and he will disclose things which are personal, which again will solidify your relationship with him.
You know, I'm curious. I'm going to say this to the listeners who are listening out there. I'm curious to see what their opinion is about lunches or dinners, how effective they are. So if you guys are listening, hopefully you are, please leave a comment about that subject specifically and let us know what you think. I'll share it with Hikmat whenever there's a comment. Okay, so you're trying to build this relationship. He goes through a moment of crisis and you're there to help him. Are you talking about personal crisis, business crisis, or both? Could you
Of course, both. Of course, both. Again, like once you are at that level of the relationship, I mean, if someone passes away, God forbid, in his family, you need to be there for him, because again, you're not in this. I would say, like, the difference between a good SEAM team and a great SEAM team is this idea that you're not for the business. And if you think about it longer term, salespeople in general.
Yeah, like you mentioned. All right, for everybody who's listening, we had some technical glitch here. We lost. Hikmat was talking with himself for a couple of minutes, so I'm just gonna ask him the question again. So we were talking about what kind of crisis would you be involved in, and personal or versus business, and you mentioned both, right?
Yeah, so Ramsey, I think once you're at that level of trusted relationship with your customer, you need to be there for him in any type of crisis. So whether it's personal, God forbid someone passes away in his family, you need to be there next to him. Whether it's a business crisis, sometimes it happens during a weekend, late nights. You need to be like, I remember days when I was working at 2 a.m. because of a business crisis. It happens. We need to be there for our customers. So yeah, it's very important to be there for him on any aspect. And this is where I was saying that any salesperson in the world, his most valuable asset is the customer relationships he has. Because say you're an SE or an AM, you might move around between companies, and if you truly hold this customer relationship, your customers will always know that you're an honest person. You work hard for them. You respect them. You're their friends. So you can always move your customers with you in terms of keeping this relationship, because this is the most important asset you own. So back to your question about crisis, yes, you need to be there for them, and it should come out naturally. Like if you're there for them, again, like because you're thinking about the business, it doesn't work. It's all something that comes natural, and this is what makes a great salesperson compared to a good one.
Okay, that's fair, and I'm happy to hear you talk about it like that, in the sense that you should care about your customer more than its business. And you seem to have, like, based on what you're saying, you seem to have very good relationships with your customers, which is awesome to hear. I'm curious, how many, you keep talking about the SEAM team. How many account managers have you had in the past?
Personally, I worked with four AMs.
At the same time, or different at different times?
So it's mostly it has been mixed. It has been mixed at the same time. So I would say at the same time working with multiple AMs, not all four at the same time, but it ranges from 2 to 3. Actually, there was a time where I worked with 1 AM, so it fluctuates.
So are all these AMs kind of fighting over your time, or do they talk to each other? Who manages your time?
Okay, I would say the management of my time was something which I worked on with my manager, the SE manager in our office, because at the end we need to give every account his share value. I mean, if a customer is bringing, say, 80% of your business, you can't give them, let's say, 20% of your resources. So the way it works for us is I work with the AM in terms of my time and my resources based on how much impact this customer can bring into our business. So it's more, I would say, a management decision. And then based on that, I can allocate my time and resources accordingly.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a worst case scenario here, and I'd like to hear your thinking about that. Let's say you have 1 AM coming to you with like an opportunity that would bring in like 80% of your total, or a very high amount of your business. And then you have another AM who's coming in with a lower business, let's say 10% of your total business, but you know that account could grow into something like 80%. And they both need it now, which is, from my experience, what AMs usually want. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, once you're in sales, you know that everything is urgent all the time. Like there's like every day I go to work, it's emails. Everyone is urgent. Everyone wants things right now, and this is the nature of the business. Now, it's all about managing expectations, and at some point you need to prioritize. You need to say, I understand if this customer might bring 80% of my business in the future, then probably I need to put time with him and invest resources and energy and making sure I get him the best solution out there. So yes, I definitely hear you in that case. And what I would personally do is I would escalate it to my manager and ask for additional resources. If there is a legit opportunity with a smaller customer, and at this particular time I don't have enough cycles to cover him, I would ask for help. I would escalate it, and usually at Cisco, I would say we're because we're a big organization, we're good in shuffling resources, and a lot of time we can get support from somewhere else, someone virtual. We have multiple ways to cover it, but we can always find something to figure it out. I mean, worst comes to worst, if there's no resources, everything is tapped out, it becomes a management decision to take the right step.
Okay. So as a summary to that answer, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong. Don't drop a customer, just find help. Is that an accurate summary?
Of course, yes, of course. Again, yes, I would say do your best, do the right thing for the customer, escalate. And this is actually something else I want to touch about, is what I find a great SE is capable of doing is he's resourceful. Like not only, okay, there's the, I would say EQ part, which is the relationship, There's the IQ part, which is him being like smart and knowledgeable and technical and maybe holding certificates, understanding the technology. But the third aspect, I would say, is him being connected to resources, whether it's internally or externally, in terms of getting the right things for your customer. Because what I've seen is like a lot of times customers come to me with certain requests for a product. Example, they are using a certain product, but there is a feature which is not there, but they'd like to have it. Now, it doesn't happen for every customer. Again, like it depends on how big the customer is and what's the impact. In those cases, if you have the right relationships inside Cisco, you can escalate it and work with the business unit directly to get it done. However, if you look like at other SEs who don't invest in building relationship and resources internally, they might not know who are like the right people to engage. I mean, we have a process which works. Sometimes I would say like it's a formal process, but the more resourceful you are, the more connections you have internally, externally, even with management, the more things you can bring and add value to your customer. And this is what makes you a better SE.
Hikmat, I just gotta say that you got no one to blame but yourself, because we're running at 45 minutes now. But every time you answer me with one question, you kind of touch upon so many other things that I need to ask you about them. So I hope you have a little bit more time.
Okay, sure.
I'm putting you on the spot here, so who would be like in general? We always talk about SEs.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Who would be?
No, I kind of cut myself off on that one. I didn't finish the question. I started rephrasing it. So we always talk about SEs as like you need a relationship, and we talk about relationship with the customers, relationship with everybody external. We never talk about internal relationships. You just touched upon that. So who are some key people in general, like would be that as an SE you would need to know internally?
Okay, great. So I would start with your manager. It's very important to have a very good relationship with your manager. It's your SE manager. I would say this is your priority number one. Number two, the sales manager in the office, again, because we as SEs and AMs, we both share the number. We are both accountable. The AM is probably more accountable, but we are still in the same game together. And as I said, we are in this business together. Thirdly, I would say anyone in the business unit who specializes in the products that your customer is using. So as an example, I'll tell you, like if I work in collaboration, okay, and I sold my customer, as an example, WebEx, okay, which is a Cisco product, I need to have solid relationship inside Cisco with the people who run WebEx. Now, it depends on how big your customer is. Like if your customer is consuming, say, WebEx on a small scale, then probably not necessarily. But if your customer is consuming WebEx with thousands and hundreds of thousands of licenses, then this is where you need to have the right relationship with the business unit who is working on WebEx. Because the way any business work is like there will be issues. There will be times where the customer wants maybe to upgrade the service. They might ask you for features. And if you have this direct connection with the right people in the business unit, this is where you can influence this change to be ahead of others. Like this is where you're putting your customers ahead of other customers, because it's always feature requests come on backlog, and the backlog sequence depends on the biggest customers and who has the biggest influence. It is a political game. I mean, there are ways to do it formally and informally, and this is the nature of anything in life. I mean, and this is where you need to fight for your customers and get them the right resources to work on their products.
So you talk about the business units. Are we talking about like knowing people at the business units? Are you talking about engineers, like software designers, or who are we talking about exactly?
Yeah, so every product, and I would say this is generic across vendors. There usually is a product manager who is like the sole person responsible for this product. Then other than a product manager, there might be a product owner, and then engineers who are more marketing for this product, and then there's the actual software or hardware engineers who are working on the product. So all those people form something called the business unit for a product. And again, because Cisco it's a massive company with a huge portfolio, we do have a lot of products, and there are different business units who focus on their own products. So I would say, like, if you have the relationship with the product manager, it's key, because he's more like the person who tries to sell it, buy it, think about ways to expand it, works on making sure they deliver what's being on their backlog, have the customer relationship with their biggest customers consuming their products. So I would say product manager would be number one. Then the marketing engineers who work on getting features and requests for this particular product. Those would be the two people. Now, the actual software and hardware engineer because those are more isolated in terms of working on a certain component, you don't need to have like a solid relationship with those people. That's why I would focus on product manager and marketing engineers for this particular product.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man. We're going to transition to the not so fire round questions, which are basically 4 questions, and I'm going to ask them, and I don't know why I call it not so fire round. I thought it was funny. No one has laughed yet, so I'm going to have to rename that. So let's go there. Other than a notebook and a pen, what is an essential tool an SE should be using?
Well, Ramsey, I personally don't use a notebook and a pen. What I've been using lately is OneNote. So I have everything digital. I have a OneNote account, and I sync it with my iPad, which I bring to my customer meetings. I have it on my laptop, and I have it on my phone. And I try to keep all my notes on this OneNote account, which, like, I broke it down on customers, like internal stuff. It depends on how we'd like to organize it. But this is the only thing I have. And what I bring when I come in is just like my iPad, and I listen, and it depends on how the customer will evolve, how the conversation will evolve. But then it's different. But that's the only thing I have with me, my OneNote account.
Okay, so you're a high tech kind of guy. Awesome. So here's a question for you that's unrelated to the not so. I guess that's why I called it not so fire round, because it always ends up making me ask more questions. So we hear different people talk, like different SEs say, okay, it's better not to have a laptop open in front of a customer, especially in a discovery call. It's better to have a pencil and a pen. Have you noticed a difference with your customers? Do your customers mind seeing you with an iPad in front of them?
Like, personally, I haven't. I think those are more like semantics. Like, some people might get offended if you have. I don't know. Like, personally, it never happened to me. Again, I would go back to the basics, which are, I mean, if you're listening to the customer in terms of, like, if you have a laptop open or closed and you are listening or not listening, I mean, this is what matters. Are you listening to what he's saying? Like, are you confirming to him? Are you acknowledging what he's telling you? Are you trying to show him interest? I think this is what matters than like having a laptop open or closed.
Okay, awesome, thanks. Any books or resources you would recommend to an SE, as in a must read or must listen to, or must resource, I guess?
Yeah, so I would say, back to my point, that SEs should have 2 skills, right? So we talked about the EQ a lot, which is the relationship building, the trust, the like just understanding people and dealing with them. So any book on that topic would help. I personally have read 2 good sales books, which I would recommend. So there's one of them called The Sales Bible. So the Sales Bible, it's a very classic sales book. I think it's a must read for anyone in sales. It has a lot of good information, and it all turns around a point that like you need to make the customer like what you're like him. You want the customer to buy from you instead of you selling him. Like more to understand more the customer than what you want out of him. The second book I'll recommend. Actually, we had it inside Cisco. It's called The Challenger Sale. So the Challenger Sale. I don't agree with everything in this book. The idea behind it is it's a little bit non-traditional sales, because it tries to tell all the salespeople across the world not to focus so much on building relationships, which I'm personally against, but they try to give a point, which is try to challenge your customer in terms of teaching him and giving him stuff. Actually, this is back to your question when you asked me about would you challenge him and would you try to tell him like you're doing this differently and so on. So this book gives you some tactics into how you can do this in an efficient way. Again, like I don't agree completely with the book, but the only part I liked about it is the fact that sometimes if you sit down with your customer and you help him or you enlighten him about things which he doesn't know, sometimes he will feel this will create trust eventually. Like it's like a cycle. But if you come from a point of view that you're helping him by challenging him, by giving him advice which is a little bit stuff which he doesn't know, he will trust you more. Again, it was a nice read. I would recommend reading it. So this is on the EQ side. On the IQ side, I always say like read technical books, like get better in your expertise. So if you're at Cisco, do certifications. If you're outside Cisco, do certifications, whether it's Cisco or non-Cisco. So make sure you read books, technical books, get up to date with the technology. Technology is always evolving, and we need to be. This is a challenge for any SE out there: is to be up to speed with the latest and greatest every single day.
Okay. Have you read Spin Selling or Solution Selling?
No, I haven't read those.
So going back to the point where like challenging the customer. First of all, I don't agree that you can challenge the customer. Usually, just puts them on the defensive, and they like you less. But the books, those two books kind of are similar, the Spin Selling and Solution Selling, in the sense that you can use questions to maybe point out the fact to the customer that, hey, if you don't fix this or you don't do this, it might cost you a lot of money. And using questions to make the customer kind of realize that on his own. So yeah, don't challenge the customer, in my opinion. Other people might do it. I have not been successful at that, but I've been successful in the other method, and I think those are good books. I recommend them. I have them on my website. So, if you're looking for those books,
yeah, of course, I'll definitely take a look. Awesome. But I agree with you. I'm not totally with the Challenger Sale, but I was saying like it has a unique idea which is worth someone just looking into it.
Okay, is there a podcast you would recommend?
No, I actually, you're the first podcast I know which is focused on how to build better SEs, like how you can build better skills for system engineers. So I would recommend your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Well, the funny part is people have to hear this podcast to hear your recommendation. So awesome. This is a random question, and we're coming to an end here, but. You're local to one area. You don't fly to different places, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So, do you have to track mileage for either work purposes or tax purposes?
Yes, when I visit customers, it's part of our expense policy inside Cisco. I mean, I can expense that, or I don't have to, but I mean, if you go around the drive to customers, you can expense that.
How like I'm trying to find like the way I do it right now today is through Google Timeline, and all of my customers are in Ottawa and like in my area. So I use Google Timeline and I try to interpolate where I went. Is there which method do you use today to track?
I just use Google Maps. I visit the customer. See, usually we take the destination from the office,
Yep.
because we have an office in Ottawa. From the office to the customer location. This is always our source, the Cisco Ottawa office, and then destination is always the customer location. And then you just go on Google Maps. I see the mileage, and based on that, I would write it down. So that there isn't any way to automate it. Like for me right now, I do it manually. Every time I visit the customer, I just write it down, and then like if it's a very short distance, there's no need to expense it. But if it's a long trip, then I would expense it. This is how I personally do it.
That's fine. I'm just trying to figure out a way. So Google Timeline is maps. You just enable it on your phone and it will track your every move, which is kind of freaky, but it saves me from trying to remember or write it down. So yeah, it's pretty much the same thing as what you did. It's
great.
just a way of telling me where I went. All right, man. Well,
Yeah, great to know about it.
Hikmat, awesome. I'm glad I helped you with at least one thing. It was awesome having you on the show. I learned a lot, and hopefully people who listen to you, I think the takeaway here is build a good relationship with your customer is the best way to sell.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks a lot, Ramsey, for having me. It's definitely my true pleasure to be on your show, and I wish you all the best in the upcoming episodes.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon, and
Sure.
Take care. That's it, guys. We're done for today. Thank you for listening. As I mentioned during the interview itself, the biggest takeaway that I had from this conversation with Hikmat was to build an honest relationship with your customers, which is kind of no-brainer, but it's harder to do than it is to just say that you want to do. And nobody wants to buy from someone they don't like, even if it's the SE. It's not just for the sales guy. So here's this week's challenge. How are you guys building relationships with your customers? Are you willing to go the extra mile to be there for them? Do you know them on a personal level? I mean, I don't mean you actually have to go visit their homes, but you can still know about them, about their kids, about like if they have a concert or a game or if they're sick, and you can care. Caring is not a bad thing. Thanks again for listening, guys. I ask that you leave an honest rating or review and to subscribe. If that's too much work, then all I ask is for you to tell someone, an SE or an aspiring SE, about this podcast. Hopefully this will be helpful to them as much as it's been helpful for me. The show notes and links to the books and certifications discussed are in the show notes, which you can get to from wethesalesengineers.com/show3. I'm not affiliated with the certifications, but I do get a small gift from Amazon if you purchase through the links I've provided. With that, this is Ramsey signing off.